Everyone, you don't have to sit, but if you're going to, this is a good time to do it. My gosh, well done. Okay, well, my name is Chris Grant, and I am president of the Squam Lakes Conservation Society, and I will be your MC for the program today. What did we do to deserve this? As we say on the tennis court, you'd rather be lucky than good. So we're going to jump right into this, and Jane Beck, who with her family and the Duchazals are our hosts today, is going to stand up and give a brief history of Willoughby Farm. So, Jane?
Thank you, Jane.
This is a little intimidating. Can you hear me? No. Anyway, welcome. And I'm supposed to give you a brief history, and it will be a thumbnail sketch of Willoughby Ridge Farm. John Willoughby first bought this land in 1804, and it was his son Luther Willoughby who first built, some of you can see it, the farmhouse, and it was much larger. There was a whole extension. He had a family of 6 kids, and he built a barn lower down. This barn is later, and all the outbuildings. His son also took over after him and died young, and he had a wife and 2 sons, Dan and Alan, who grew up here and did the farm work. And in the 1880s, when people first really started discovering New Hampshire in the summer, Squam Lake in the summer, they took in summer people, and they turned the extension of the farmhouse that is no longer there into Willoughby House. And they served, you know, fresh eggs, fresh chickens, all berries in season, and corn, and advertised it for 25 people. And in the wintertime, they took in men who cut ice on Squam, particularly for Rocky Roll. In I guess it was late 1800s, 1889, there was the opening of the Asguam house, and that was when my great-great-grandfather, Frank G. Webster, the grandfather of the Frank some of you knew, first came up here, and he met Captain Carnes, and they became fast friends. And every summer he would bring his 2 sons, Edwin and Laurie, up to fish and stay with Captain Carnes. Captain Carnes died about 1893, and Grandpa Webster bought Carnes Island and then began buying farms along the ridge. The farmers were moving out west where land was better, land was cheap, and he put his farms together and started Burley Farm. And he hired Alan Willoughby as his farm manager. So Al and Winnie, his wife, was the bookkeeper. And so they moved over to Burley, and living here was Alan's mother and his brother. And that continued until 1929, when Alan Willoughby was killed in a burning bus. He was trying to save a little girl, and he was burned to death. And so Winnie continued as bookkeeper, and Alan's mother had died, and so this place was bought by my great-grandfather, Edwin Webster, and it became the horse barn. And as kids, we all made use of wonderful riding. Burley Farm continued till about the early 60s. And at that point, my father, Tom Choate, bought Willowby Ridge from my great-grandmother. And he was interested in raising standardbreds. And he kept Willowby, he restored the barn at that point and continued until he died in 2000. And then it came to my sister and myself. And we didn't know much about the horse business. But we thought it's a wonderful setup for horses, and we tried retired police horses. And we eventually had about 40 police horses here. But we could never make ends meet, so we had to pull the plug on that. And then here was the barn. And what to do with the barn, it needed structural work. And we wanted to save it. So we began to think about how we might use it. And it occurred to us, my niece was engaged, and it occurred to us that it might be an event barn, and maybe we could host 3 weddings a year and have community groups like yourself use the facility. So that's what we did, and we were extremely lucky to have Matt Emmons, who is an absolute genius master carpenter. Is Matt here? I told him he probably fled. Anyway, he just did a superlative job, and if you don't know him, he's a longtime Squam native, and his great-great-grandmother started Rocky Bowl. So, hands up to Matt. And I hope this will give you a great meeting. Enjoy the great sunshine and views. Thank you.
I told her it was perfect. A great summary. So I want to thank Kitty and Guy de Chazal and Jane and Tom again for this. You should all know, actually, that Guy, earlier this week, I believe, won our annual Kasumpi Squam tennis tournament. So kudos for that. I think we might have had 4 people playing or something. No, we had 12. But he will admit this too. His sister-in-law, Jane, is a better golfer. As good as she is a speaker, she's even a better golfer. So now I'm going to officially call the meeting to order here and say welcome to all of you who are members. This is just a great showing. We haven't been in person for 3 years, and Zoom was convenient because you could drink lots of coffee, but this is obviously a lot more fun than that. So thank you for coming. To be a member, by the way, all you have to do is write a check. And if you want to vote today, you have to be a member. So if you'd like to vote, it's never too late, and at little as $1, you become a member of the Squam Lakes Conservation Society. I also want to thank John Moulton, who was starting to pack up. I think most people chose getting another donut over getting their name tag. And I want to thank our board. We have an amazing working board. We have 19 people on the board. Our board meets 6 times a year, not 4. As a land trust, we're reviewing land transactions, and so you can't let too much time go between meetings. We currently have 6 committees, and the committees often meet as often as monthly in terms of, one of our committees does. I want to introduce the committee heads. Patsy Correga chairs communications, and Susan Gutchess chairs development. And I know I'm going to leave someone out, Roger, but I'm doing okay so far. Martin Carmichael. I haven't seen Martin. There he is. He chairs governance. Ken Evans chairs stewardship. Dave Martin chairs finance. And Wynn Brown is the chair of our capital campaign committee, so most of you have probably heard from him recently. And our lands committee, I'm sorry, there is one more. I think we have 7 committees, one more. And Peter Gross is currently serving on an interim basis as chair of our lands committee, and of course, Peter's doing a better job than anyone ever has. So Peter, thank you very much. Okay, so the first official order of business is we need to approve the minutes from last year's meeting. They're on pages 4 and 5. I'm sure everyone's studied them carefully. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes? A second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. Okay, so our first speaker on the agenda is Wynn Brown, and he's going to update us on the Forever Squam campaign.
How wonderful to see you all here this morning on this beautiful day in this beautiful place. Thank you for coming. I have a lot of very, very good news to report, very exciting news for the SLCS. And you will all remember last year we launched something we called the Forever Squam Initiative. And the initiative is an ambitious effort to take the current area of conserved land in the Squam watershed, which is now at 30%, and raise that percentage to 40%. The staff identified approximately 60 properties that they think have high conservation value, and decided that we would, if we could get the conservation interest in all of those properties, we would meet our 40% target. Now to do that, we decided we had to have some funds available to support that effort. And thus was born the Forever Squam Capital Campaign. We initially set a goal of $3.2 million for that campaign. We soon raised it following a very enthusiastic initial response from many donors to $4 million. And we decided we would raise that money to be used for three purposes. For 60 properties, we estimated $10,000 per property, $600,000 to cover transactional costs that would arise in the case of a particular transaction with a landowner. The whole idea was to reduce or remove any disincentive a landowner would have to give us a conservation easement on his or her property. For example, survey costs, appraisal costs, legal fees. The fund would take care of that and make it a seamless transaction. The second bucket was $900,000, $15,000 per property for stewardship. Stewardship is the bedrock obligation of the SLCS to monitor property to make sure that the easement terms are adhered to in perpetuity. So we had to raise enough money to be able to have that available as far as the eye could see to ensure that these easements would be respected. Our third bucket to reach the $4 million goal was $2.5 million to be used for acquisitions. Now, we couldn't possibly afford to buy 60 properties and put them into conservation. But from time to time, the SLCS has an opportunity to get a conservation easement or a fee, even a fee interest, at a bargain sale price. And we thought in those instances we would hate to lose a property simply because we couldn't put up with a portion of its value. So this money was going to be used for that purpose. Now sometimes, as you'll hear further from Roger, there are opportunities on project-specific instances where we could get together with adjacent landowners and others who are interested in a particular property and say, if we put up X number of dollars, how about all of you contribute another Y number of dollars, and together we can put this piece of property into conservation. So that was the purpose of the $3.5 million. In addition to the 3.5, or in addition to the 2.5, we had $1 million left over from what we call the Uplands Fund, which was a limited fundraising effort we did maybe 10 years ago. And we would take that $1 million, add it to the 2.5 acquisition money, and have 3.5 million to play with. Now that was our first goal for the campaign or for the initiative. The second goal, no less important, was to broadly base the campaign to involve the entire watershed if we possibly could. We set a goal of 250 donors to support the campaign. We felt very strongly at the outset that we wanted to involve the townships, we wanted to involve people of all walks of life, we wanted to involve the schools, we wanted to involve the businesses in the watershed. And so we set about various initiatives that we engaged in over the past year to broaden the appeal so that everybody was included. The campaign thus became the first broad-based campaign, fundraising campaign the SLCS has ever engaged in its 62-year history. Now, the good news I have to report this morning is how we've done against those two goals. On the first goal, $4 million, as of Thursday morning, we were at $4,104,000. And that is because of your support, and I can only say thank you for everything you've done to make this campaign a success. We are so excited about the opportunity that this gives the SLCS, and it's because of your participation that it's possible. On our second goal of 250 donors, we're a little short. As of Thursday, I think we were at 204. Roger mentioned, I think, at our board meeting yesterday that 2 gifts had come in that day, yesterday, so we are at 206. And that means we have only 44 more donors to meet our goal. And that's where those of you who haven't yet had a chance to contribute to the campaign can make a big difference. So please, by the end of the year, do what you can. As Chris said, it only takes $1 to become a member. And you don't want to feel left out. You want your names on the list that we will publish at the end of the campaign, showing what good company you're in by being supportive. I want to end simply by thanking the campaign committee, our board, above all Roger and the staff for everything they've done to make this campaign a success. And I will now turn it over to Roger to tell us how we're going to put that money to work.
Wow. Well, good morning. This is my 20th annual meeting, and never have we had such a fine morning and group of people gathered. And we missed all of you over the last 2 years. Thanks for chiming in virtually, but there's just no substitute to being with one another once again. So thank you so much for coming on this beautiful morning and taking the time away from your time here in this very precious place. I want to acknowledge our partners, the Squam Lakes Association. I don't know if EB made it over, but they're a real critical partner for us, and the Conservation Fund is here this morning. You're going to hear from Larry Seltzer, but the CFO, John Gilbert, is here, and Sally Manikian from the fund. John and Sally, want to raise? Thank you. Thanks for joining us here this morning. So Forever Squam. The way that I view Forever Squam, it's the next chapter in Squam's commitment to land conservation. And it's about conserving what we love and building on past conservation successes while challenging, as Wynn said, the entire community to extend its commitment to protecting our natural resources at this critical time. By doing so, we will honor all those who define what Squam is all about, because their dedication to protection of its resources are what we enjoy today in this beautiful setting. So to take you back, in 1960, a group of landowners gathered together to create the Squam Lakes Conservation Society, And the goal was to adopt a non-governmental approach to land protection. The incorporators included Frank Webster, our founder, Harold Coolidge, Virginia Unsworth, Dorothy West, and too many others to name. But in doing so, SLCS became the first local land trust in New Hampshire and one of the first in the nation, way ahead of the legislation that allowed for conservation easements and so forth. And it was a true community effort that we build on today. And since then, we've been led by many community leaders that are familiar to you, such as Nancy Grady, Daphne Moat, who turned 100 years old 2 weeks ago, Bev Ridgely, Pete Richards, Peter Van Winkle, Tim Vale, Angus West, Laurie and Nancy Coolidge, John Thompson, all the current directors, and so many more. So that by the beginning of this year, they helped us set on a trajectory to complete 163 projects and realize the permanent protection, as Chris said, of 30% of our watershed. And what is interesting is all that land, almost all of it, remains privately owned, just as our founders intended. So this year marks a pivotal moment on our journey. Earlier this year, the Conservation Fund completed the massive Beebe River project you can read about in your program, protecting 6,395. You may note in your program it says 6.395. Well, it's 6,395 acres along the flank of the north flank of the range. So we applaud Larry Selzer and his team and the many partners for conserving and restoring this remarkable property. We thank Laurie and Nancy Coolidge, Tim and Audrey Fisher for starting the process by buying the 937-acre Spencer Brook property in 2007. It includes all the land between Percival and Morgan, and thanks to all the donors to the Squam Uplands that made this possible, so that we can fulfill John Thompson's dream of walking from the shores of Squam Lake to the peak of Mount Washington, all on conserved land. Building on this success, we're really ushering a new era of land protection and stewardship, and fittingly called Forever Squam. So earlier this week, I received a letter from Suzanne Kelsey and Ken. I will quote, "Ken and I are happy to support the Forever Squam campaign. Thank you for all your efforts and creativity to bring people together to protect and steward the Squam watershed. As you know, it's a special place and already being cherished by our kids, nieces, and nephews. Thank you." And that's thanks to all of you, all of us. So what Forever Squam is a roadmap that bridges our past with our future. With the success in creating an opportunity fund that Wynn described, we're accelerating the pace of conservation like never before. With your support, we intend to protect another 60 properties over these next 3 years, helping us to find the balance here and to see if we can get to 40% of our land in permanent protection. We'll open up new areas for hiking and exploration. We'll ensure our forests will continue to grow while mitigating climate change. We'll protect our wetlands, and again, we'll seek to find that balance between what we use as humans and what's available for our brethren wildlife. So we're on our way. This year, we completed 3 projects that you can read in your program. Sanford Doyle 2, that was a gift of a conservation easement of 10 acres. The Thompson Preserve from John and Carol Thompson, it gave us 14 acres on College Road. And Lambrook Swamp, which was the bargain sale of a conservation easement protecting 18 acres from Bryce Bennett, who's in the back. Thank you, Bryce. And the way it worked was, we covered some of the expenses on these projects, like the survey and the bargain sale in one case, and the rest were donated. So I'm happy to report to you today that yesterday the board approved and Tim and Audrey Fisher signed the protection of Merrill Island, which is 22 acres. A mile of shoreline and I took an inventory of all the lakes in the region from Sebago through Sunapee, Winnipesaukee. It was the largest unprotected, undeveloped island in the lakes region. And it's really something that we hope to continue to build on. Thank you very much. And the island will continue to be maintained by the landowner as it has for many years. But it's another step, as we started with Forever Squam, how one thing leads to another. Next up, we're working on the Haskell Preserve, which is a bargain sale purchase of 45 acres on White Oak Pond, with also about a mile of shore anchoring the south end of White Oak Pond, a real gem of a property, including Pine Island. Ann Lovett is donating a conservation easement on 37 acres off of Coxborough Road called Avery's Woods. And it will help create a bridge of land stretching from Avery's Woods to the Sanford Doyle 2 piece of 75 acres, kind of connecting from a wildlife corridor perspective, White Oak Pond with Little Squam. We're working on, and should get wrapped up shortly, the protection of a 52-acre property 39, which will be conservation easement on Route 3 in Center Harbor along Swaney Brook Swamp. From Kenrick Nelson. That's a donated easement, and the way Forever Squam works is we paid for the survey, which costs about $9,000, and we'll take care of the recording, and in return, Kenrick has pledged to donate a conservation easement. So we're going to do this playing out throughout the watershed. We have projects underway in Center Harbor Neck, High Haith, Mount Prospect, the flank of Rattlesnake, White Oak Pond, and throughout the watershed. So this is what your funds allow us to do, is to really ramp up the acceleration. So who's going to do all this work? All of us. We'll maximize our potential if the whole community participates. So if you want to discuss conservation options, this is the time to do so. We'd love to have you join if you're able to consider conservation at this point, and we stand at the ready to help with surveys and what other support would be helpful. So this is really the time for us to fulfill the dream of our founders, to ensure the quality and character of Squam are extended to the future generations of stewards for all the days to come. It's an ambitious plan, it's timely, and there's not going to be a better time to do it than what we have before us. So this is what it's all about. I get to work with a remarkable team that I want to recognize. I can't thank them enough for their dedication and creating such a fun, productive environment. You're going to hear shortly from Pete Helm, our Director of Stewardship, in the back. Pete, thank you. Many of you are meeting Denise Sirocco for the first time. Denise has been with us for a year. She does all the amazing communications and she's become a really big part of our team. Doug Hill, who's been with me and SLCS for a long time, guiding us along as we go down the journey. Thank you, Doug. Sarah Hickson, this is her first annual meeting, and she brought along Casey, so thank you, Sarah. Sarah does our bookkeeping. And our two amazing AmeriCorps members, Emerson Fares and Emily Cardy. You guys have done a great job this year. And I'm really pleased to announce that we've hired, it's interesting, many of you knew Ben Weimer from his photography, his amazing photography. He sent a note this morning wishing us, he's on the West Coast, he was up early wishing us a great annual meeting. Next week, on Monday the 29th, I'm glad to welcome Andy Crowley as our land protection specialist. The last 4 years, Andy's worked for the Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forest, honing his skills, and as we move forward with all these projects, Andy will be pretty central with all of that. So it's an amazing team that you have, we have, and I'm just so grateful to all of you and the people I get to work with. So I want to leave you with a quote from a book that Tom Kelsey gave me a few weeks back called The 8 Master Lessons of Nature. Highly recommended, really a lovely book by Gary Ferguson. The natural world all around us The natural world all around us is one of the best ways of taking care of the world inside, priming in each of us the ability to not only be at home with ourselves, but a precious resource for everyone around us. We do land conservation not for ourselves, but for the whole community and for the future. Thank you.
Good morning. Dave Martin here, the treasurer, and I want to tell you all that you are working at a great disadvantage. The speakers have a beautiful view out here, so we are encouraged to stay here for a long time. However, you have seen the numbers in the program here. You can see that the numbers are large and the numbers are good. And I want to just make a couple comments about the numbers, but not the specific numbers so much. Roger just acknowledged the staff, and it's important for you all to know that we also have a group of other experts that work behind the scenes and get little recognition, but you should feel comforted by the experts that we do have looking after the money. Now, we have an investment committee, and this investment committee is very active. We have 5 meetings a year, and we review investment strategy in depth. As a matter of fact, we just had our annual strategy session, and Peter Coolidge hosted that out on Long Island. So you can imagine the in-depth discussions we had there with a spectacular view. The members of this investment committee, the leader is Angus West, who's been running the investment show for probably a couple decades at least. And he's very ably supported by Phil Bennett, Peter Coolidge, Tom Beal, and most recently Bob Pinkert. And we're very lucky to have these experts. We also have another group called the Finance Committee, and both Angus and Phil serve double duty on that particular committee, and they're joined by Ken Evans, Chip Harris, and Ed Lesser. We meet at the Finance Committee about 4 times a year, and we review Roger's budget. We recommend the budget to the board, but then importantly, we also review the expenses as they're incurred during the year, and we review the financial statements and meet with auditors and so forth. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes that you may not be aware of. The final comment that I want to make is that we very much appreciate your generosity over the last several years. When you think about 2020 and 2021 being pandemic years, and then you look at our contributions to the operating funds, it's remarkable. We've been able to cover our expenses. When you look at that as a 2-year period, 2020 and 2021, the contributions that you all have made have just about covered the expenses that we incurred in those 2 years. And those contributions did not include any federal aid during the pandemic. We decided not to apply to those programs. So you all have been very generous. You might also note that our operating expense line is going up. We have a great staff, and they have terrific skills, but we have to pay them too. And the expenses for 2022, which you don't see in the program, will be going up another $50,000. So my appeal to you is don't forget the annual fund. We're all very excited about Forever Squam, but we do need your support on a recurring basis to fund the operations, and we really appreciate what you've done in the past, and we appreciate the faith that you're showing in all of us. So those are my comments on the finances, and I'm going to turn the program over to Ken, or I'm turning it over to Pete. Hi, Pete. You're up next.
All right, we'll bring this down a little bit. The last time I spoke to, I can't remember what group it was, but I started off by saying I'll be short, and I made a huge mistake doing that. This morning, good morning, and thanks, Dave. We've certainly heard about the wonderful things that's happening at the Conservation Society between Forever Squam, the campaign, new conservation projects, and so forth. It's quite astonishing what has been accomplished and indeed what is planned. It's pretty remarkable. I don't usually speak at the annual meeting, so you may be thinking, uh-oh, here's Pete Helm. What bad news is he going to share? Well, I am the stewardship guy who's always trying to anticipate and prevent bad things from happening. It seems I'm always thinking, what if this happens, or what if that happens? While I may be the worrywart for the Conservation Society, I am extraordinarily happy to let you know that the Stewardship Department has nothing remarkable to report. So, indeed, yeah. In the stewardship business, this is a really good thing. It's sort of the no news is good news kind of thing. All of our conservation easements have been monitored. Our SLCS-owned properties have been monitored. And aside from a couple of sort of character-building moments, everything is in good shape, and we're in a really good place. I'd like to publicly thank all of our monitors and the Stewardship Committee. You know, they keep the machine, the conservation machine, oiled and moving. They're just super committed, and if it would be appropriate, just be careful, but I'd love to have all the current and past monitors and Stewardship Committee members stand if they would. That's okay. Thank you. Pretty amazing. That's I'm going to guess pretty close to half of the people here, which is just remarkable reflection of your commitment. So with a group like that, I bet you're thinking there's no reason to be a worrywart, right? Well, not so fast. The Conservation Society and the Squam region in general is facing a number of significant threats in the years ahead, and we need to be thinking about them now so that we can minimize the risk to the natural resources we all worked so hard to protect. I'll spare you the long lists of what-ifs that go through my head, but I'd like to share 3 challenges with you that I think are ever present. Top of the list, you don't have to look far into the crystal ball to see that climate change is a serious and real threat. What will extreme drought or extreme rain events bring to the forested areas of Squam? What will happen if the water levels rise by 3 or 4 feet, or they drop by 3 or 4 feet? What happens to the shoreline vegetation that we all treasure? Will we live with the changes and adapt, or will we harden the landscape and build walls to contain what we have today? We all know that weird weather events are happening, and we need to prepare now to deal with the changing climate. Second on my list is simply volunteer attrition. As we all know, time flies when we're having fun, and we know there's a lot of fun to be had around here. And it seems the younger generations know that too, and they are making the most of it. So the challenge is how to engage the next generation to be the stewards of this place, especially with our incredibly mobile society. We're blessed with many wonderful volunteers, and some next geners are here today as well. But how do we encourage more of the younger generations to become more involved, to convert them from being users to being owners of Squam? It will take work by all of us to get the next generations fully engaged. The last threat is what I would call, bear with me here, the slow degradation of the Squam ethos. This is the hardest one to describe. Oxford defines ethos as the characteristic spirit of a community as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. For many, Squam provides a sense of place. It isn't just the lakes and ponds, the mountains, the trails, or the wildlife. It's all of it combined. It's a feeling. Squam ethos has been passed down through the years by many families, friends, and so many visitors that have experienced Squam. The message, come to Squam, turn off your phone, listen to the loons, engage with the natural world, check out the stars, explore the shoreline, pick blueberries, go for a hike, and just breathe. Settle in, refresh, reuse, recycle, and give back. So how do we energize and strengthen this ethos with neighbors and visitors to the region who may not already share this ethos or don't even know about it? It's definitely worth contemplating, maybe while you're out walking in the woods or in a long, quiet paddle. Okay, enough from the worrywart. The really good news in all this is that Team SLCS, and that would include all of you and those that aren't able to be here today, is a formidable group of energetic, thoughtful, and generous people who are very committed to preserving the character of Squam. I know that together with you and your friends, we can and will address the challenges ahead. We can assure that Squam, this remarkable place, will be an example of what a community can do when we work together towards a common goal for the greater good. Thank you so much. And Ken, here's Ken. Ken's going to, well, I'll let you know. Ken can tell you what he's going to do.
Thank you, Pete. I have the outstanding privilege of covering the fun part of the program today. In 2007, the SLCS Stewardship Committee created the Davenport Award to recognize an individual or individuals for their exceptional commitment and service to the Squam community as stewards of its protected properties. The award is named in memory of longtime SLCS monitor, board member, and honorary board member Dick Davenport. In the annual report, you will see a listing of all the recipients of this award going back to 2007. Please take a look at that. It's an outstanding list of people. So this morning, what do duct tape, potato chips, nails, Post-it notes, paper clips, and bottled water all have in common? These were simple inventions that changed the way we live in the world today and how we go about our lives. And for every one of the people that invented those simple processes, you know there were thousands of people, if not more, who slapped their heads and said, now why didn't I think of that? Well, our 2022 award recipient will cause you to react in much the same way. To say that this person has worked tirelessly for conservation is an understatement. It is more appropriate to say that this individual has made an outsized contribution to our conservation society, our area, and our town. And in so many ways, this work has been done behind the scenes, monitoring, searching for boundaries, providing stewardship support, and doing it whenever asked, and sometimes without even being asked. When I learned more about this person preparing for today, my reaction was, why didn't I think of that? Well, today, Tom Stepp, we are thinking of you as the 2022 recipient of the Richard Davenport Award for Stewardship in our community. Tom, come on forward and bring your family with you. All the way. Tom is a longtime monitor for SLCS. I am told that he keeps impeccable notes, and his reports are complete and extremely accurate. Tom is always willing to take on a challenge in the woods, finding boundaries, adjusting boundaries, walking difficult properties. He is the local record keeper of surveys and historical maps of the Squam Range and surrounding lands. Tom is a follower and admirer of John Keniston, a surveyor of 100 years ago, and he's probably one of the few people who has walked and seen most, if not all, of those chiseled granite boundary monuments in the hills of Squam and around. As a committed member of the Land Committee, Tom brings his knowledge of the woods in very valuable ways to the SLCS team. He's also active in the community. He serves on the town rec board, which oversees our SLCS property at the town beach. Tom has meant so many things to conservation, not only here at SLCS, but in his personal and professional life as well. Tom, we congratulate you today as the 2022 Richard Davenport recipient. Please welcome Tom and his family. Yeah, it's an awful mess. It's coffee, but we can get you. Okay, with the fun part over, Roger, please come up.
All right, thanks for bearing with us through this awesome sunshine. Frank Stevens, what year did you host our annual meeting at your house?
Here, but I don't remember.
Yeah, okay. It was some time ago, but for those of you that were there off the lovely property overlooking Little Squam, Larry Seltzer was our featured speaker. This was before BB River was on the radar screen, or we were just beginning that process. So I'm very happy to introduce a true friend of the Conservation Society, a real thought leader in the conservation world, and just a champion of an individual, Larry Seltzer.
Well, what a thrill it is to be back here at Squam to celebrate this amazing project. I was only a bit dismayed to know that the fun part of the program has ended. And I'll try and do my part to keep you at least somewhat entertained on this beautiful morning. But I want you to know before I begin my remarks how rare a set of circumstances this is. The board and the staff of the society is unlike anything I've seen anywhere in the country. And I've had the privilege of traveling to all 50 states. There are 1,400 land trusts in this country. And I will tell you, there is no finer set of people than you have right here. And the accomplishments that you have posted on the board, what you're planning with Forever Squam is unmatched. And I thank you for that. And I am thrilled, as well as my colleagues, to be here with you today. You know, together we've done something remarkable, protecting for all time more than 6,000 acres of BB River and Spencer Brook. It's a magnificent addition to the legacy that you all have created, and I know will be an accelerator for the rest of the Forever Squam campaign. You see, this BB River project represents something new and different in conservation. It's not purely preservation. It's not purely for profit. Instead, something in the middle. It's a bold and muscular idea. It's the manifestation of an emerging vision for conservation that I believe can mobilize capital and deploy it at a scale never before seen. And the urgency I feel around mobilizing capital and getting to scale is based precisely on what would almost certainly have happened to BB River if we hadn't been able to step in and acquire it. The property almost certainly would have been subdivided and converted into something other than a forest. This inexorable march toward fragmentation and conversion of forests began in the 1990s, when the forest products industry in this country restructured. Changes in the tax laws, the emergence of a global pulp market, and pressure from Wall Street all caused the integrated forest products companies to sell their land. And what started as a trickle soon became a torrent, and in the span of just a few years, 90 million acres of private land changed hands. It was the largest transfer of private lands in the history of the United States. When this tidal wave of disinvestment took place, the conservation community was poorly positioned to respond, and as a result, 20 million acres of forest was lost right off the top, converted out of forests into some developed state. Interestingly, 70 million acres was purchased by a new class of owner, investment companies that didn't exist before. They aggregated pension fund money, university endowments, foundation endowments. They didn't buy the land to feed their mills. Frankly, they didn't want any manufacturing. Instead, they bought the land as an investment, timber as a new asset class. The good news is they bought 70 million acres of forest land, keeping those lands intact. The bad news is they bought them in investment vehicles with 10-year horizons. And at the end of the term, they would liquidate the timber and subdivide the properties to maximize their returns. Over the next 15 years, another 20 million acres of forest land was lost in this country. So we went from 90 million acres to 70 million acres to 50 million acres. And if nothing changes, the remaining acres also will be at risk. Well, we at the Conservation Fund, we looked at this situation and we said there has to be a way for us to intervene, to conserve these forests when they come on the market. You see, these forests are not just any lands. They are some of the most important lands that we have. They provide us with clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, opportunities for outdoor recreation. They provide habitat for wildlife. They sequester more than 15% of our nation's annual greenhouse gas emissions. And they provide jobs for more than 2 million people. Jobs that can't be exported overseas. Jobs that are essential to the health and well-being of rural communities. Put another way, these forests are not an amenity, something that is nice to have. These forests are a necessity, something we must have. They are essential, and yet, as a nation, we are not investing in them as we should. Why is that? Here we have the greatest land conservation challenge in the country, and up until recently, we weren't really doing anything about it. To try and make sense of this, I went back and traced the history of the environmental movement in this country. And what I found helped me to understand what needed to change if we were going to step up and protect these large, intact, working forests. My investigation actually began with an interesting book by Marshall Goldsmith, perhaps you've read it, called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. As the title suggests, the book points out that the things that have made you successful in the past may not be the things you need to be successful in the future. I believe this is a vitally important message for the environmental movement. And to help you understand, let's go back to the beginning when Teddy Roosevelt was President of the United States. It was a time of tremendous economic expansion. The mantra was, go west. And our nation's vast natural resources were there to be consumed. To build our cities, we clear-cut our forests. To support manufacturing, we extracted minerals and energy without regard to the environment. And for sport or fashion, we hunted species nearly to extinction. Dismayed by all this, Roosevelt took action, creating our first national forests, our first national wildlife refuges, setting aside millions of acres of land. His efforts launched what I call the first era of the environmental movement, what I call the era of conservation. And today, our network of protected lands is the envy of the world. By the mid-20th century, however, we faced a whole new set of environmental challenges. Air quality in some cities was so bad that you had to turn on your windshield wipers to remove the soot before you could drive your car. Rivers, including the Nashua right here in New Hampshire, were so polluted that some turned a different color each day of the week, depending on what dye was being used. And widespread use of chemicals like DDT threatened iconic species, such as the peregrine falcon, with extinction. And then, in 1962, Rachel Carson published her seminal book, Silent Spring, which for the first time linked human health and the environment. Her book unleashed a tidal wave of grassroots activism and ushered in the second era of the environmental movement. I call this the era of regulation. During this era, we created more than 50,000 pieces of environmental legislation and regulation at the federal, state, and local level, including some of the most important laws this country has ever passed: the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Endangered Species Act. This era was about stopping bad things from happening, and it worked. We reduced industrial pollution. We removed the most harmful of chemicals from the market. We developed better land use planning to keep development out of the most sensitive areas. And yet, these gains came with a price. You see, our over-reliance on the tools of legislation, litigation, and regulation became our Achilles heel. As a movement, we became too much defined by saying no, and not enough by saying yes. What we need now is a new kind of environmentalism, defined not by saying no, but by saying yes. Yes to an ideology that balances the needs of people as well as the needs of nature. Yes to new relationships, especially with the private sector. And yes to new ideas that can scale up to match the magnitude of the challenges we face. Let's call this new era, this third era, the era of convergence, defined by the coming together of two of the most powerful forces in the country today, the environmental movement and the free enterprise system. Combining these two holds great promise, but actually realizing new gains will require significant change. Think about it. Protecting Beebe River and the millions of additional acres of forest that are at risk will require faster innovation, more collaboration, and greater financial sophistication, things not often seen inside the environmental movement. But they are seen every day in business. We need to combine the science and passion of conservation with the analytics and tools of the marketplace in business. Now, bringing together the environment and business won't be easy. We have different cultures, different training. We even speak different languages. Environmentalists talk about ecosystems and biodiversity. Business people speak of discounted cash flow and return on invested capital. We are divided by what the great British biologist C.P. Snow called a gulf of mutual incomprehension. And yet, to protect these forests, bridging that gulf is exactly what we must do. To begin, we need a common framework that takes into account the full value of forests, not just for wood and paper, but for all the beneficial things that forests provide. One place we can start is by changing the way we speak about forests. We know forests provide us with clean air, clean water, and are a major part of addressing climate change. So why do a majority of Americans think of forests simply as parks with trees? Frankly, this has never made sense to me. For all the benefits they provide, I believe we need to start thinking about forests as part of our nation's critical infrastructure. Just like our rail lines, fiber optic cables, and the interstate highway system. Listen to how Peter Kilborn, a writer for the New York Times, described the nation's highways. He said, "The 46,000-mile network of limited access roads that make up the interstate system is a linear economy on wheels, a distinct and self-sustaining 51st state, in a sense, that generates life and commerce." What a marvelous description. A linear economy on wheels, a distinct and self-sustaining 51st state. I think our nation's working forests should be considered the same way. A self-sustaining economy in green, a 52nd state. If we began to speak about forests this way, I believe things would change. No longer would we subsidize the conversion of forests to development. No longer would we ignore the financial and other returns that come from increased biodiversity, enhanced water quality, and the ability to fight climate change. If we talked about forests as infrastructure, I believe public funding for permanent conservation would jump dramatically. In fact, in the reconciliation bill just passed, there's an additional $700 million in the Forest Legacy Program, the same funding source we used for Beebe River. And that's a great start, but it's just a beginning. Finally, if we talk about forests as infrastructure, I believe we can begin to mobilize billions of dollars in private capital, capital interested in sustainability, especially in addressing climate. Yes, the words we use matter. And to help make this point, let me tell you a little story. Once upon a time, there was a lady from right over here in Holderness who was rather elegant and old-fashioned, especially in her language. This past winter, she and her husband were planning a week's vacation in the South. So she wrote to a particular campground asking for a reservation. She wanted to make sure the campground was fully equipped, but she didn't quite know how to ask about the toilet facilities. She just couldn't bring herself to write the word toilet in her letter. So after much deliberation, she finally came up with the old-fashioned term bathroom commode. But when she wrote that down, she still thought she was being too forward. So she started all over again, rewrote the entire letter, and referred to the bathroom commode merely as the BC. Does the campground have its own BC, is what she actually wrote. Well, the campground owner wasn't old-fashioned at all. When he got the letter, he just couldn't figure out what the woman was talking about. That BC business really stumped him. After worrying about it for a while, the campground owner finally came to the conclusion that the lady must be asking about the local Baptist church. So he sat down and wrote the following reply. Dear Madam, I regret very much the delay in answering your letter, but I now take pleasure in informing you that a BC is located 9 miles north of the campground and is capable of seating 250 people at one time. I admit it's quite a distance away if you're in the habit of going regularly. But no doubt you will be pleased to know that a great number of people take their lunches along and make a day of it. They usually arrive early and stay late. The last time my wife and I went was 6 years ago. And it was so crowded, we had to stand up the whole time we were there. It may interest you to know that right now a supper is planned to raise money to buy more seats. They're going to hold it in the basement of the BC. I would like to say it pains me very much not to be able to go more regularly, but it surely is no lack of desire on my part. As we grow old, it seems to be more of an effort, particularly in cold weather. If you do decide to come down to your campground, perhaps I could go with you the first time you go, sit with you, and introduce you to all the other folks. This is a very friendly community. Yes, words matter. And all joking aside, protecting our nation's large, intact working forests demands a new approach. Now, the good news, demonstrated right here in partnership with you all and the success of BB River, is that we have created just such an approach, and it has exceeded all of our expectations. At the Conservation Fund, we call it our Working Forest Fund. The idea is that we buy large, intact working forests when they come on the market. We take them onto our balance sheet. We design a sustainable harvest plan to cover our expenses while we hold it. We secure the money for a permanent conservation easement, and then we resell the property back into the private market to be managed as a sustainable forest, keeping the jobs and the tax base intact for the rural communities. To date, we have deployed $835 million in 39 forest projects across 19 states, totaling nearly 1 million acres. As part of this, we issued the very first green bond for conservation in our nation's history, a $150 million 10-year taxable note. And we brought in more than $125 million in private capital to co-invest with us. Finally, we leveraged all of this with more than $265 million in public funding for permanent conservation easements. Our success to date has encouraged us to raise our sights even further. We had initially targeted 1 million acres, but we'll blow through that in the next 12 months. And so as we look at the 50 million acres of land that's out there, and the Forest Service estimates that roughly 10% of that is of high conservation value, 5 million acres. That has become our new target. And so we are moving in to this new era of convergence in a bold and muscular way. But we cannot do it without partners. We cannot do it without innovation. We cannot reach scale without engaging private capital. These things are all possible because we're offering something that people and institutions have recognized has real value, financially and environmentally. When we resell these sustainably managed forests, they generate an average net return of 4 to 5%. Not bad for infrastructure. And if we can partner with philanthropies in new and creative ways, we can get that return rate even higher. And as a result, we're now seeing new opportunities to partner with family offices, impact investors, and companies that have set net zero goals for their emissions, and frankly, don't have a clue how to get there. These expressions of interest from these new partners have encouraged us. 5 million acres is a daunting task, but by combining the best of business and the best of the environment, this new era of convergence, I believe it is possible. Now, I'd like to leave you with a final thought. Albert Camus once said, "Real generosity toward the future lies in giving all to the present." What you are doing here at Squam, the amazing energy behind the Forever Squam campaign, and the exciting innovations around what we have done together to protect BB River. This is what I believe it means to give all to the present. You should be so proud of what you have accomplished and what we have done together. But you know better than I, there is so much more to do. And I look forward to coming back in a future time and celebrating once again with some of the greatest conservationists in the country. Thank you.
Talk about a tough act to follow. Larry, great job. And it was fun, particularly that story. I got most of it, I think. So last night, Wynn and Sarah Brown hosted an outdoor cocktail event for the board, first time we've been together in 3 years. And Larry Selzer and his teammates John Gilbert and Sally Maniki and Kane And all I can say about the three of you is you are a class act. Just remarkable. Thank you. There's no question, Squam community, we need to find another project to partner with the Conservation Fund. Let's think big. We are having a celebration of the BB River project this afternoon at 4 o'clock. It's detailed on page 11 in your guide, your program. Getting there is not easy. There's many different ways to do it. It's at the third bridge of the BB River Road. And Martha is going to ride bikes with me. Hopefully we'll still be married by the time we get there. But you can also walk, and there are parking on both ends, and I'm told that if you do need to drive in, Roger has the security code that gets the gate open, because there's no cars allowed on the two ends of it. From Campton. Yep. Yeah, the road from the other side is not really passable. Okay, so now we have a little more official business. I know we're sort of right at the point we said we'd be done. We need to elect officers and directors for until the next meeting. We have 5 directors up for re-election. One of them, and I think this is all detailed on page 7, I believe. One of them is Bill Nessheim, who will be a new director. There's a really good bio of him on page 7. Bill, I'm not going to go through your background now. Bill has served on our stewardship committee. He's an active land monitor. He hosted a gathering for those of us who were raising funds for Ever Squam this summer. And so Bill is already effectively a director, and we hope you will vote in his favor when the time comes. Also, 4 other directors. Martin Carmichael is up for his second 3-year term. And up for a third 3-year term are Leo Dwyer, Susan Gutchess, and yours truly. I think we're going to do this all as one vote. We also, every year, elect our, is that okay, Wynn? He's my counsel. Yep, okay, thanks. Every year we elect officers for a 1-year term, and the officers are also detailed in there. Me as president, Ann, and Peter Gross as vice president, Dave Martin as treasurer, and Martin Carmichael as secretary. Do I hear a vote? I'm sorry, do I hear, what is it, a motion? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. Okay, we have one other little thing to do. We have one director who will be leaving us. And our custom every year is to give one of these paddles with the Heron motto to a retiring director. This director has just served a 9-year term. It's Patsy Correga. Patsy chaired our communications committee. For the 6 years I've been on the board, she was the chair. She met monthly except for when her tennis schedule got in the way. But most of the time they met. And the beauty of this committee was that there were 5 people on the committee who were not directors. Very active Squam community people, and it was an idea factory. Most fun meetings to go to, even more fun than Ken's meetings. Patsy is creative, smart, funny, but she also has a good brain. And a year ago, and time to time, we do have issues with landowners and other people, and Patsy was really valuable to me a year ago. Words I wrote down were a voice of reason, a great reality check, and a really clear thinker. Patsy, come up and get your oar. We're really going to miss you. Okay, Roger's not waving at me, so I think I've not forgotten too much. We're going to adjourn in a second. 2 other quick things. If you have questions or comments, please call us or come see us. I think that's the best way to do it, rather than keeping everyone here for 10 or 15 minutes. You know, Roger has the most open door policy ever, as do Pete and everyone else in the office. When you walk in, they drop everything to talk to you. Makes it hard to have a meeting sometimes, but you are always welcome to drop by with all your thoughts and questions. Also, Roger wants help picking up the chairs and moving them someplace. So if everyone can pick up the chair, where are we taking them?
Right by the building.
Right by the building. Okay, with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second. Thank you for coming.